everyone. Welcome. I'm Darren West. Welcome to the Circular Design Series session today covering future of materials. I work for SAP, a company that touches 90% of the world's transactions. I'm responsible for our products in the circular economy, and I'm looking at topics such as circular design, regenerative business, and material passports. So I see design as an enabler for systems change. So we are focused on designing waste out of systems and creating new business models to tackle the world's toughest environmental problems. So our goal is to empower designers with data and with tools that they need to make the circular economy a tangible, acted-on reality. Or look at it this way. So we help designers to measure the properties of the materials that they use, like recycled content, recyclability, or embedded CO2. And then we help the designers to track those materials as they flow in and out of the organizations and around in loops. That information is crucial because it drives action. It helps designers to use new materials and use materials in new and creative new ways. I strongly believe that designers need to think big picture. So all of you here, as designers, hopefully we have some designers in the room, right? All of you here are enablers of systems change. So what materials you source, how you design your products, how your organizations sell those products, how you service the end consumers, and how you deal with taking back those materials. All of these things are design decisions. But right now, that's really hard to do, right? But what would the future look like if you had that information on where to find these suppliers, and you had that information on all the materials that you wanted? Just think about that for a minute. So SAP has started to build this circular economy vision. For example, we have a product called Responsible Design and Production, clue in the name. It can record and analyze the recycled content of every gram of packaging that a company pushes into the market. And that helps companies get to their goal of 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable packaging. And in farming, we have digital agriculture solutions. And they can tell you about the soil conditions and the irrigation of a farmer's fields. But you, as designers, you need to insist that those suppliers, those farmers, use regenerative agricultural techniques and adopt the best practices to put the goodness back into the soil. And how do you know that unless you can measure it? So SAP, we started to scratch the surface of the awesome potential of the circular economy, which is why it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you a disruptive voice from the world of design, who is rethinking the future of materials to be regenerative by design. Please welcome Jonas Pettersson, co-founder of an award-winning design studio, Form Us With Love. Thank you, Jonas.
Thanks for the introduction. Probably hard to live up to those words. Thanks everyone for coming. Take your time to listen here for 30 minutes. We live in a wasteful time. We have a quite wasteful culture. And I think my message is who's willing to change? It's also the industries and companies that will be in business tomorrow. But today we talk about design. So what could be our role, your role as designers, or what should be our role as design to affect this topic? I will bring 3 examples, so not the answers most likely, but give you 3 examples on kind of different levels that we've been working on. One is to scale a venture if someone is interested in that. Maybe you had an idea in a bar and want to do that one day. How you do something with limited resources is the topic. And the other one is about how do you change a giant from doing something in one way and take steps to a better way. And the last one, if we manage in time, is about an industry, a recycling industry, Ragn-Sells, which is not working with design at all. Like, how do you come in as a designer and help such industry and taking steps forward? Hopefully it can bring something to different topics to some of you. So my name is Jonas Pettersson, as Darren said. I'm co-founder and CEO of Formas with Love. We're probably mainly known for our products across different industries like IKEA, Samsung, and Orkla. But to us, the products is just a consequence of our approach that we had since we started 2005, where we think design generally should be about how can we improve life for people. Maybe that's obvious. How can design also improve business or create profitability? And the last but not least, how can we care about the planet? How can we minimize our impact or even change, a broken system? And that makes our work extremely fun, because just designing objects is maybe fun for some, but not for us. So this approach makes, our work really, really worth doing every day. And it's soon 20 years since I, started. And every morning I wake up with a smile. And what I think I've learned, no matter if you work with a startup or a mature company, or in this case an industry of recycling industry, it needs to be built into the core of each, ambition. So I don't know how much of you are working in different companies and so on, or if you're studying, but business is still the driver. Like, you can have a fantastic idea on sustainability, but when it comes down, it's usually just business that counts. So what we care about is like, how can we actually build that into each organization or each company's ambition that business and planet could actually go hand in hand. Moving into the first example, and for you who don't know what Baux is, it's 10 years since we started this company. It's the ambition to do very sustainable building materials for the architecture and design community, so meeting the expectations of architecture. But it did not start as an idea of building a company, but rather started our studio, our previous studio in Stockholm. We found this beautiful location, an open space that met our ambition about how we saw our culture, but the acoustic was horrible. Like, you see all these, hard surfaces everywhere. It's like a gallery. So we started to research a little bit, like what kind of material is out there, and we came across, I don't know if you've seen this, but it's all around the world. It's like a basic building material that we all had kind of some relation to. We did a little bit of research, figured out there was one factory in Sweden and less than 10 in the world. So we decided to go to the one in Sweden, which is located in the woods where a lot of the production industry in Sweden, especially furniture industry, called Småland. It's also where IKEA has its location. So we went here, we went to the factory, which is kind of in the middle of their own wood, and we met the owner of the factory. And he could have stood out as like the most passionate person I met about something that is quite, from the start, quite basic. Everything in his factory was built from the material, the sign, as you can see on the door, and even his house next to the factory was completely built from, the material. So he was kind of in it for real, and he started to kind of, give that energy back to us. And we kind of, basically this is what it is. It's a building material, quite basic, boards, and it's made from wood, water, and cement. And we started to kind of, as designers, you ask a lot of questions. It's almost like being a journalist, like how is this made? How is the production? It's kind of a streamlined production. And we started to ask, is it possible to do other shapes? Yes, but the building industry just wants big sheets. Can we do color? Yes, we have a color facility, but they only want gray, or maybe white. So it kind of pops a lot of like, the questions gives you an answers to maybe new opportunities. And back on the train that evening, where our heads were like spinning, like there's something here that's like super interesting, taking this building material in a new way. So we kind of run a few workshops and thought, what can we do with our own space as the first stage, and take this building material into more like a tile, acoustic tile material. And we started to elaborate a little bit, not very strange shapes, you recognize this. Color is not that strange either, but for them it was completely new. They'd never done it before, and basically none of the factories in the world had done something kind of in this range. We put it up in our studio. We tested with magnets so we could take it down and change it, and basically we just took a photo and communicated. And then we had a call from Stella McCartney that wanted this in her store, and suddenly the factory started to have calls from all around the world. The problem was that he could not speak English, so he had to bring in his wife. So it was kind of cute. She was doing the phone calls and he was doing the orders, running production. But we were starting to kind of deliver, these hexagons to all different places. But it was definitely nothing that could take off. So we shared this story to many people like I do today, everyone we met at work and off work. And then at one day we met like two entrepreneurs, one in marketing and one in supply chain. And we kind of joined forces to see like how can we build, really truly a sustainable brand in this field of acoustics. And then we kind of populated with more alternatives, more like the Lego for the office. And we started to see, beautiful installation coming from Google and schools and these examples. So this gave us a lot of energy and also some time to think about what's the next step. Could we take this further? Because these factories now, I'm not so afraid of copying, but more or less every factory in the world was copying this after they saw the demand was growing. So how can we take sustainability to the next level? And then we came across like a factory in Sweden doing coffins in pressed paper. A complete bio-based product and completely circular. And we started to they're not production company, but they're a biochemistry company, which makes it even more interesting from a designer to start talking about how can we make a material. And obviously it doesn't have the same properties in acoustics as coffins, so you need to meet regulations in architecture to make an acoustic product. So we started to have dialogues with them, like how can we, avoid firing, how can we have water repellents, and that kind of gave us like a new recipe, which we didn't do, but as a designer you can be part of that process. And they kind of built, the right properties to meet these expectations. For me, the most exciting was how they explained the fire resistance, taking like an enzyme from the grass root that survives when there is a fire in the wood. So knowing these things, you can kind of build new properties instead of using chemistry, which is done today in more or less every product. You want to have fire regulation in textiles and so on. And we didn't have money, so we needed to do small tests to see if this actually worked. A chemistry company said you can also cover it if you don't like the surface. Like, are you crazy? This is the most beautiful things we have seen. Like it's you see everything that is in this material, which is also like super important from like changing a norm. Like you should be really transparent what material is. I think that's one important thing that we have as a designer. And then thanks to the first launch that I showed, we started to get some revenue, and we could actually invest everything into setting up a new production with like bigger molds and laser cutting and so on. And that was kind of launched 2019 with enormous amount of challenges, like 2-3 years of development. But I think without setting up an ambition at its core, I was saying in the beginning, we would never have done this. This is like everyone, we're like 4 owners, everyone really, really wants to do this, to push this topic to the max. And then you can also do something with very little resources. But if we did have the ambition to earn money as the only ambition, we also want to do that. So that's not the secret, but you need to combine the two to actually be able to do something like this. And at the moment, we're exploring taking textile waste into new products. And so there's a lot of things going on at the moment that I'm not able to share today. So going from a startup and very little resources to how is it actually to go into something very, very big at a very industrial scale, which maybe is more known for low prices and high volumes. But I had the opportunity to talk at IKEA Forum like 2013, where they gather all the global leaders. And then I had to ask to see if we actually can do things specifically for their share collection in the beginning. And our reflections from just analyzing that was it's quite small things that can improve a lot as the first step. Like the shares are not comfortable. It's like basic thing, which today would not be even a topic. But if you put millions and millions of euro into production, you should maybe put a little bit for us to prototype and test before you go into production. So that was really our first, project to do a share, definitely meeting IKEA's price point, but also the expectations on public use. So this was the first product that was BIFMA tested. And the founder, which is not alive anymore, but he actually was part of, adding the handle into the project because he really wanted to have them on all the restaurants at IKEA globally. This gave us a lot of understanding on how is it to work in this scale. Today, making this kind of product would not be a good starting point to make a PP plastic product, but to just think about how we can scale quality and longevity was really a big shift at the time. But it gave us the opportunity to jump into another topic, which was about waste. And IKEA has kind of developed their own material for a few decades with the intention to do pallets. That was not going through, so we had the opportunity to kind of work with the material expert to see if we can take this material into an industrial scale. And then you kind of need to understand what this material is. It's quite different from polypropylene, a virgin material. When you have recycled content, it's different. It's also more fragile and in one way more strong. So you need to kind of understand what you're designing from and not designing and then try to push things into your ideas. That's at least our approach to things. We also want to bring like a fun, take on flat pack furniture. I'm not brought up with, Vitra and exclusive furniture in my home. It's basically IKEA furniture. So I know what it takes to put things together. So could we do something that is like easy to understand, fast, and like without any manuals? That was also one approach beside this material innovation. This is just a few pictures from the process where we kind of prototype a lot in our studio and test things. But the main kind of contribution here, I think, was like, how can we make something that is not a screw that you put with a screwdriver, but something that everyone would understand? And then our thought was like, a handle is something people globally understand how to open and close a door. So can we use the same thought to put together a product? Coming in closer to production, there is around 3 years to develop such project, which sounds maybe a bit crazy, but coming in closer to production, there's a lot of different people stepping in, like engineers and testing and so on. And it was very easy or close that the product was colored with paint because business didn't think it was ready for the consumers to see that waste could be a value. That was a lot of argumentation and managed to pass it through. The other one was to skip the handle because screws are much reliable and easy for engineers to secure in tests. And that was also managed to come through. And that was basically the final result. And I think this is still have some years in the making. And if we would start something today, what would that be? It would definitely to go from virgin material to recycled materials, and now truly how can you make a circular product for real? But it's all about stepping stones, I think, to at least to change something very big and something that fundamentally come from another era where everything was linear. If I have time, I will go into the last one. And that's more like an example of how you can step in as a designer into areas where design is not even perceived as, a tool. And in this case, it's quite a progressive recycling company based in Sweden, but they're not only a Swedish operation. And they really, really want to see if we could, do early tests on materials that they did not know what to do with, to take waste into pilots. Before this, we did a glass project together where we looked into the waste glass that is laying in the ground in Sweden and more or less every country that has a glass industry. So that's another project we've been working on, but I will share this one. Sand is one of the most exploited material in the world, secondly after water, and it's around, I think, 50 billion ton annually, so that's hard to grasp. But I Googled it, and it said that it was, if you want to build a wall, it's 17 meters wide, 17 meters high, and then goes all around the world, that you can build every year from the sand that we harvest. So that's happening every year. So it goes with every resource. It's like we need to take care of more of what we already have instead of using new ones all the time. And I don't know if you're aware of, but like the reason why we use new ones is because it's easy. Every production, everything is like set up to be done from virgin materials, and regulation is done to use virgin materials. But this specific project is about sewage sludge, which is basically poop, which is even more interesting area to step into as a designer. But Ragn-Sells is now doing a pilot production with the ambition to set up like a few production sites in Europe where you take sewage sludge, I think I have a picture here, and circulate that in an ash to phos process, and then it goes back as phosphor to the agriculture. There is like a byproduct which is sand, and it's silica sand, and that's a red sand. And as everyone wants, pure virgin materials, it's hard to see, like, can you go to the building industry and say, we have a red sand, do you want to build a house with that? They will say, of course not. It's completely uninteresting for us. So how can you build pilot tests to see if we can move into slowly, build trust, and then scale it up? So this is basically the material that we've been working around. And you can see that as what most say is like, oh, it's like sand, but it's red, unfortunately. But as for us, I think as a designer, it's like, oh, wow, it's red. That's really cool. What can we do with red? That's much more of a value than gray. So it's like the perception of what you have and what you can do with that. I think that's kind of what we want to approach this with. So we just elaborated with a lot of things in our studio, but realized we need to kind of conduct tests with real industries. So we kind of mapped out a little bit different industries that we could approach to do tests with. Like the color industry was one, brick, acoustic materials. There is many different things that we kind of tested and then bounced this back and forth. So I think our role as a designer is much more of a facilitator. It's maybe not so much what you see as like giving shape or designing, but kind of have a process of how do you actually push things forward. And then part of this project is really to gather also key people. Like we do this in our studio, and we kind of gather people from the industrial value chain. So it could be people from the wood industry or production or architects or designers, and then kind of share what we have. Usually when we do projects, we launch them and it's out. But here is like, how do we stop in the middle and have critical voices, put things on display like an exhibition, and have like a moderated talk and also bring new thoughts to what we have. So this is kind of just early stage, like tests what you can do with the red sand. And of course now Ragn-Sells is like explaining this for the building industry and like trying to change their way of thinking about resources, because that's their objective, like how can we actually take waste into value. And that's more or less it. And to maybe sum up a bit, it's kind of all about what have I been talking about actually. I think how I started was like how do we build, no matter if it's startup or established huge company or someone that's never been working with design, it needs to be their ambition. Because I've been trying so many times to convince companies on doing things, but if they're not willing to do it, it's not going to happen. And you just spend so much time trying to convince someone. So maybe convince them to put business and planet at the same level, or at least very close. It will help a lot to do these kind of things. Thanks a lot for listening.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions to you guys in 1 second. So have a think about some questions. Jonas, that was brilliant. Lots of really cool examples. I think you'll all agree, right? Just to get the ball rolling a bit, you talked about some of the challenges of like getting an idea and getting it going. Could you just give us a couple more examples of what stops ideas from scaling up? Just some of the challenges you've had over the years.
I think what sits in between, I mean, for us as a studio, we work as a designer and then we have brands. That's kind of the typical, could be furniture brand or, but what's happening in between is production, supply. Like that's, one obstacle, or you can say because they do what they always done. So you need to find the suppliers that are willing to change or already changed. Maybe they do something else, like the coffins, or you can do that. I think that's what creative people maybe can see and change. Okay, that's a production, let's do this instead. But then you need to kind of match that with like what is the expectations on business, which is the other aspect of what usually our brand's thinking about. So like, what's the demand and what's the possibility to actually make? Like working with IKEA, it's usually you can say, oh, this is an interesting material, but there's not enough materials to even start production. Whether for Baux, it's possible to do small scale, and we can test. So trying to understand that kind of how things are coming together, it's like a puzzle almost to yeah.
Okay, so find the pieces of the puzzle. Right, audience. I'm sure you've got some questions. We have a roving mic, is that right? You've got roving mics? Cool. Okay, so we're going to put the lights up. We've got a question at the back there.
Thanks for the talk, Jonas. I was just interested in whether in your process of creating those products from recycled material, you thought about end of life of those products, of recycling the recycling, because a lot of materials aren't endlessly recyclable. Plastic, maybe some plastics only once or twice. So does that form a part of your process?
Absolutely, but I think it's also like what are we, because we can push, if you're running a brand, like then you can decide everything. Like Baux, we can also decide a lot because we are part owner, but when you're working with external brands, you can only suggest things that they are willing to do themselves. So it's always there, but are they not willing to do it, or they are not capable from a business perspective, then it's really, really hard as a designer to, convince someone. But it's definitely part of our thinking, and I'm willing to, to push that, of course.
Okay, we had another one there, I think. Yep.
Hi. Just from a commercial perspective, the red sand product, do you have like a timeline for when that might be, ready for market in terms of regulations and all those sort of hurdles that you have to get to in order for something to be commercially?
I mean, the plan is to build these factories within 5 years. That's kind of where they are now. So, and there are different timelines for different factories, but I think the first one is in Sweden and then Germany. Regulations, no, because it's not been, tested. So this is really what's happening now. So they are like flying around. The head of sustainability, Ragn-Sells, was in New York this week, going to COP28 with this project to see if we can actually, talk about this, not to push this specific material, but more like the thinking behind it, the view on waste, and not see it as waste, see it as, valuable resources. So I don't have questions on when it's possible, but the building industry is the most demanding on sound, and they're also one of the most traditional, using enormous amount of sound to do concrete. So they won't change anything if it's not certified, and they know, okay, this is going to hold, even if we know it's going to be maybe similar good, but they need the regulations. I think is key here.
Yeah, so it's still sort of in that investigation period of...
Yeah, and I think that's fine to be, I think for us at least, to just, so okay, this is an experiment. This is piloting, which is also needed, which is super different from making a share for IKEA, which is about, millions of shares produced.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you. There's another question over there.
Hello. Do you think consumers are starting to see the value in circular materials, or do you think it's more wise, especially within furniture, to design things for longevity and repair and that kind of thing?
I mean, I get a bit sad sometimes, like how much price and convenience is the main driver. Like we built another startup called Forgo, where we did hand wash with the insight that it's 85% water that we're shipping and creating a lot of plastic waste. And we kind of created a powder, which you just use tap water. Brilliant. Like, this is going to be, the biggest idea ever, and it's super hard. Like, if you're used to go to the store and buy your soap at the same time as you're buying your milk, you need to change small behavior, which I have so much respect for. Good ideas might not always fly. Like, how hard it is to actually change very, very small behaviors if it's not in it for us. Like,
Maybe I could add a bit. So SAP works with some of these very, very big brands and also very small brands all over the world. But one of the experiences we've had is you need to do lots of things. So recycling is important, but as we all know, it's not the answer. So you need to do recycling, you need to also do repair and get those take-back loops in there. And often setting up the take-back loops is the challenge. How do you get your consumer to want to bring that back? And that varies depending on the industry, whether it's like clothing or whether it's furniture or whatever. The solution will be different. But you do, as designers, I think, have to think about that big system. How do I design the product with that end in mind? So hopefully we've inspired you to go and set up some businesses, folks, right? Okay. So with that in mind, you've got a crowd of designers here, or people interested in circular design, who are going to go out into the big wide world, and you're all going to change the world, right? Yeah? So, Jonas, what one thing would you say you'd like this audience to go away and think about when they leave this room?
I don't know if advice is my thing, but maybe not comfort zone. Like, collaboration maybe is the topic, but if you spend time with the ones who are very similar, it's quite convenient. So I was in the recycling conference last week, and I felt like I was the odd bird, really uncomfortable, but it's also super interesting to step into other people's competences. So and I think that's maybe the role of design, to be that facilitator or It's not going to be so much about give shape or make nice products, but to know a lot of people, know competences, and put them together. So.
Thank you, Jonas. One more time, big thank you for Jonas. Thank you very much.